She came west to marry a stranger, a bargain sealed by debt, a promise signed in dust. But when her hand brushed his best friend's, the frontier itself seemed to catch fire. Who would she betray? Her husband bound by law, or the man bound by her heart? The first time Clara Mae saw the frontier, it looked less like a promise and more like a punishment. The sun glared off a land stripped bare, dust stretching without mercy, broken only by splintered fence posts and the skeletons of cattle lost to drought. She stepped down from the stagecoach in a dress too fine for the grit under her boots, clutching a letter whose ink had nearly faded from weeks of travel. She was here to marry a man she had never met. Her father's debts had written the bargain, and the stranger on the horizon was to be her husband. But as the wind whipped her bonnet strings and the driver snapped the reins, a darker thought clawed at her chest. What if the man who waited for her was worse than the debts she left behind? At the edge of town stood Samuel Hart, tall, sunburnt, and solemn. He tipped his hat without smiling. His ranch had been near ruined by raids, and his need for a wife was as practical as it was personal. Clara felt the weight of expectation, in his gaze heavier than the trunk she carried. But just behind him, leaning against the corral fence, was another man, broad-shouldered, dust on his shirt, eyes bright with something Samuel lacked. His name, she would learn soon enough, was Elias Boone. Best friend, partner. The kind of man who looked at her not as a debt repaid, but as a mystery unraveling asterisk. That night, the wind clawed at the windows of Samuel's weather-worn ranch house. Clara lay awake on a straw mattress, her hands clenched tight. She heard boots outside, the low murmur of voices, Samuel's steady tone, and Elias's restless one. She couldn't catch the words, but the tension in their voices carried like a storm rolling across the plain. By dawn, the sky split with red light. Samuel saddled his horse, preparing for another long day. Elias offered her a tin cup of water before Samuel could. Their fingers brushed, too brief, too dangerous. And in that fleeting touch, Clara Mae felt the shape of the real frontier, not the land, but the choice. A choice that would test loyalty, break hearts, and leave someone standing in the dust asterisk friend or foe, salvation or a crueler fate. The days bled into each other, blistered by sun and broken by the groan of weary cattle. Samuel rode hard from dawn till dusk, building fences, scouting the creek beds, doing the work of two men and refusing help from a woman he barely spoke. 2. Clara, left to tend the house, felt like another piece of furniture, useful perhaps, but unseen. It was Elias who noticed. When her hands blistered on the washboard, he brought salve without a word. When the roof leaked during a midnight rain, he climbed up with hammer and tar before Samuel even stirred. And one evening, as the horizon burned with a crimson sunset, Elias lingered near the porch where Clara sat sewing. "You'll never get that hem straight in this light," he said. His smile was faint, but it carried warmth she had nearly forgotten existed. She lowered her eyes quickly, the needle trembling. "I'm not used to this place yet," she murmured. "You will be," he said. "The land breaks people, but sometimes it shapes them into something stronger." The words lingered between them, dangerous in their gentleness. She thought of Samuel, his silence, his rigid sense of duty. She owed him obedience. But Elias's presence pulled at her like the river pulls at the banks, wearing down resistance grain by grain. That night, when Samuel came in late, reeking of sweat and dust, Clara served supper without a word. Elias sat across from her, eyes fixed on his plate. Silence filled the room, heavy as gun smoke. She wondered if Samuel noticed the current passing beneath the table, the stolen glances, the careful avoidance of touch. If he did, he gave no sign. But the prairie had its own way of exposing secrets. One afternoon, Clara carried a bucket to the well and stumbled. Elias caught her before she fell, his hand strong at her waist. For a moment they froze, eyes locked, breath shared. Then she tore herself free, cheeks burning hotter than the noon sun. From the barn door, Samuel watched. His jaw tightened, though he said nothing. The silence was sharper than a blade. The frontier had always been cruel, but now Clara saw the cruelest danger wasn't the outlaws who roamed or the drought that strangled the fields. It was the growing truth inside her chest, that she had come west to marry one man, and her heart had betrayed her to another. Asterisk and betrayal in the Wild West never ended quietly. The drought deepened, turning the land into cracked parchment. Wells ran low, and men grew mean when water was scarce. Samuel rode north to strike a bargain with a neighboring rancher, leaving Clara and Elias to hold the homestead. That absence stretched like temptation itself. On the third day, Clara found a letter tucked between the pages of Samuel's ledger. The edges were frayed, ink smudged, but the words were clear. "This land ain't yours by right. Sell it, or the fire'll, take what bullets don't." Signed with the crooked mark of a local gang. She froze, heart pounding. Samuel had said nothing. When Elias returned from the pasture, she showed him. His face darkened. "He should have told me," Elias muttered. "Damn fool pride'll get us all killed." That night, wind rattled the shutters. Clara sat by the lantern, sewing in silence. Elias leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. "You don't belong in this fight," he said softly. "Don't I?" she asked, her voice sharp with fear and defiance. "This land is tied to me now. My marriage. My life." Elias stepped closer, his shadow long against the wall. For a moment it seemed he would speak her name differently, like a vow, not a duty. But instead, he clenched his jaw and turned away. Still their bond grew in small, stolen ways. He fixed the latch on her trunk. She mended his torn sleeve. They spoke in glances and silences that said too much. The danger outside only bound them tighter. On the fifth evening, riders were spotted on the ridge. Dust trailed their horses like smoke. Elias loaded the rifles. "If they come close, stay inside," he ordered. Clara wanted to protest, but the look in his eyes held both, command and care. She obeyed. The riders didn't descend that night. They circled like wolves, waiting. Inside the cabin, Clara and Elias sat close by the fire, listening for hoofbeats. Every crack of wood, every creak of wind sounded like doom approaching. And it was there, in that fragile silence, that the call to action wove itself like a whisper in the flames. Out here in the Wild West, every choice carried a price. If this tale grips your heart, of love blooming in dust and danger, don't turn away. Subscribe, stay with us, because the next twist may change everything. Beyond the door, hoofbeats thundered closer. The storm came without warning. Not the rain kind, but a wall of dust sweeping the plains, swallowing sky and sun alike. Samuel rode back into it, hat pulled low, horse lathered, rifle strapped across his saddle. He looked worn to the bone, but his eyes caught on Clara and Elias standing side by side at the porch, too close for comfort. "Inside," Samuel barked, tying his reins. Clara obeyed, though her pulse raced like the horse's hooves. Elias lingered, jaw tight. The silence between the two men was heavier than the storm pressing against the walls. By nightfall, the gang made their move. 6 riders, faces wrapped in bandanas, rifles gleaming even through the dust. They circled the ranch like vultures, shouting threats drowned by the wind. Samuel fired first, a warning shot that cracked the sky. The reply came swift, bullets sparking off the water trough, splinters flying from the barn door. Clara ducked low, heart hammering. Elias pushed her toward the cellar. "Stay down," he growled, slamming the trap door before she could argue. She crouched in darkness, hands shaking, listening to gunfire rattle the night. Above, the battle raged. Samuel's voice carried, gruff, commanding. Elias's gun answered, steady and fierce. Horses screamed, men cursed, the storm howled. Then, silence. Heavy, waiting. The trapdoor wrenched open. Elias's hand reached down, pulling her up. His shirt was torn, blood seeping at the shoulder. "It's not over," he panted. "They'll be back." Clara pressed her hand to the wound, breath catching. For a heartbeat, the world shrank. To the heat of his skin beneath her fingers, the tremor of his body leaning into hers. He looked at her then, not as Samuel's wife, not as a burden, but as if she were the only thing anchoring him against the storm. And in that gaze, Clara saw the truth laid bare. She was bound to Samuel by law, but to Elias by something deeper, wilder, more dangerous than any outlaw's bullet. From the doorway, Samuel stood watching. His rifle hung limp at his side, but the fire in his eyes was harder than steel. He had seen it too. The storm outside was fierce, but the one inside the ranch threatened to break them all. Morning came pale and brittle, the air thick with ash and dust. The outlaws had fled, leaving 2 of their own dead in the dirt. Samuel buried them without a word, shovel striking dry earth, each thud echoing like judgment. Clara stood with Elias at the edge of the field, her hands clasped tight to keep from trembling. When the graves were filled, Samuel faced them both. His eyes held the weight of sleepless nights, of trust cracked and breaking. "I brought you here, Clara," he said, voice low but cutting, "but I see now your heart was never mine." Clara opened her mouth, but no words came. The truth was too heavy, too raw. Samuel turned to Elias. "And you, my brother in arms, my partner. You've taken what was mine in silence." Elias shook his head, pain etched deep. "I never meant..." "Meanin' don't matter." Samuel cut him off. His hand hovered near his holster. For a breathless moment, the world froze, dust hanging in the air, the sun glaring white, the silence of the land holding its breath. Clara stepped forward, voice breaking. "No," she cried. "There's been enough blood. This land doesn't need more graves." Samuel's eyes softened for a flicker, then hardened again. He holstered his pistol, jaw locked. "This ranch is mine. My fight, my burden. You two, do what you will. But know this, love here costs more than life. It costs loyalty." He turned, mounted his horse, and rode into the horizon, leaving Clara and Elias staring after him. The sound of hooves faded, swallowed by the vast, unforgiving plains. Clara's chest ached with guilt, with relief, with fear of what came next. Elias stepped closer, not touching her, but near enough she felt the warmth of him. "We'll pay for this," he murmured. "One way or another." She nodded, eyes fixed on the endless land ahead. The frontier gave nothing freely. Every bond was forged in fire, every love tested by dust and blood. Yet as the sun sank low, casting the sky in gold, Clara knew her heart had chosen. And for the first time, she chose herself. If Clara's courage stirred something inside you, don't just let her story drift away like dust on the wind. Like this tale, subscribe for more and ring the bell. Because out here in the Wild West, love may be scarcer than water, but it always finds a way.